Welcome to the Social Media Church podcast. I'm Neil Smith, and I'm joined by my good friend and our good friend, Phil Cooke. Phil, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I love being on your show. You ask great questions.
I appreciate it. Well, Phil, for those that don't know who you are, and you've been a guest here before, but would you let, and you do a number of things, but would you maybe share a little bit about your background and what it is you do?
Yeah, we have a production company in Burbank, California. We produce television programs, films, TV commercials. We've done Super Bowl spots. We most like to focus on helping nonprofit ministry organizations, churches, tell their story more effectively. I think if you've seen many nonprofits try to tell their story, they don't do it as well as they could, and their organizations are doing amazing things around the world. So we come alongside and try to help them tell their story more effectively. We're working on a documentary film right now. We just finished another one, but we do everything from social media to short videos to commercials to long form, a little bit of everything. Plus, I write a few books in between. So there you go.
I love it. And you do a lot of things in between all of that, beyond just writing a few books. And we've got a big announcement at the end of the episode that I'm excited for everyone to hear. And so if you want to skip ahead, you can do that. But I encourage you not to and hear the conversation in between. But we do have a big announcement at the end of the show that I'm eager for everyone to hear. Well, Phil, you have been basically a voice to creatives. For many creatives, and I'm someone who has perceived myself not to be a creative because I'm not an artist through the years, but I've learned otherwise, and so many of your words have spoken that into me. I would love, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, but I'd love for you to share maybe a little bit about what medium do you think creatives should be focused on in this new day? You're a film guy, yet you're a blogger, you're a writer, and we've talked a little bit too about podcasting recently. So there's kind of these mediums of written word, audio, and video. Where do you think creatives should be focused in today?
Well, let's go back to your question a minute ago about the fact that you didn't think you were creative for a long time. I think that's a myth a lot of people live under. When I speak at, I'll teach at movie studios here in LA or television networks, and probably every time I speak, a third of the audience will raise their hand and say they weren't born creative. They just don't have that skill. The truth is that is a complete myth. I've never seen any research that indicates that some people are creative and some aren't. The truth is some activate it more, some use it more. In fact, give me a group of toddlers in a room and you'll see they're wildly creative. That totally blows the myth away that some people are born creative and others aren't. So if you're listening to this today, understand that you are creative. You may have let it go dormant. You may not be active. And maybe today we'll talk to you a little bit about restarting and kind of jump-starting that creativity. But your question about platforms is a great one, because I think every creative person needs to express himself in a certain way. And that, as you probably guessed, that answer is a little different for everybody. I started out with a camera. I knew in high school, I took my dad's Super 8 movie camera and we made Army movies and space movies and war movies and all kind of stuff. And I knew early on that I could do something with a camera that made people talk about ideas. And so that I spent years and years and years using a camera to express myself. And then we got to a place where we didn't have the budget to hire a writer for a lot of projects. And so I started doing it. Lo and behold, I realized I've got a gift there. I had no idea that writing was fun. It was a great passion, and I was pretty good at it. So I've been writing most of our stuff ever since. And then I've written about 7 books along the way. So now I'm gravitating toward podcasting. I'm going to be launching a podcast. And I think that we just kind of float. I think creative people, the best creative people, are fairly fluid. You start to see the intersection of where your gift is, where your talent is, and where the need is. So if you're a person that's not terribly, you don't feel comfortable writing, no problem. Start a podcast, start a video blog, start something else. But every creative person is a little bit different, and we should start focusing on, one of the things I'll say, Niels, is that everybody talks about their passion. Let me just say this. Stop worrying about your passion and start focusing on what you're really wired to do. I was passionate about directing for years, decades. Only getting to the point, I eventually got to the point where I realized the place, the level I wanted to go in directing, I just didn't have the gifts to get there. Had I started years ago as a writer, who knows where I might be today. So find out what you're plugged in to do, what you're wired to do, and that will open the door for whatever platforms you should pick. Sorry, I didn't mean to go so long in the answer.
This is great. So when it comes to finding what it is you're wired to do you think that comes from listening? Do you think that comes from what other people are telling you? Do you think that comes from just studying? Is there a test you can go online and take? How do you find that thing or those things that you're really wired to do?
That's a great question. Years ago, I took a DISC profile. You've heard of DISC profile, Myers-Briggs, there's strength finders. All those are really good. For years, I was embarrassed that I was not a numbers person. I mean, I thought my wife and I would get divorced because neither one of us could balance our checkbook. It drove us crazy. And I was so humiliated that budgets, looking at an Excel spreadsheet just gives me hives. I just hate it. But then I took a DISC profile and realized I'm not a detail person. I'm a people person. I love the big picture. I'm an idea guy. Once I realized that's the way I'm wired, and I shouldn't worry about what I'm not wired to do. We found a lady in our church who could balance our checkbook for us, and we turned it over to her, and man, I could start focusing on the creative stuff. So I think those are good. I also wrote a book called One Big Thing, Discovering What You Were Born to Do a few years ago. And in that book, I talk about it's not a mystery. It's not mystical. It's pretty easy. And a big part of it is just as you say, ask people you respect. It's funny that if you look back over your life, we all get known for stuff. Remember when we sat around a table planning the prom in high school and somebody would say, John, you're good with numbers. Why don't you do the budget? Susie, you're good in front of people. Why don't you host it? Sam, you're creative. Why don't you come up with a theme? People notice early on what we are really good at. Yep. For years, I thought my only job was to keep track of everybody at the mall when we go shopping. But people notice what you're good at. And if you can plug into that, start listening to people you respect, that'll give you an enormous amount of insight into what your gift really is.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And you shared with me that creativity is the number one skill that CEOs are looking for today over anything else. And it makes sense. That's a hard thing to define, but naturally it's a skill, as you said, that all of us can develop. And I'm assuming your first blog post is not nearly as good as your last blog post. Your first movie was not as good as the last one you created. It's developed. How can someone develop that skill of creativity wherever it is they're at today to become a more creative individual, a creative leader?
That's a great question. And you're exactly right. It does take practice. I dated a girl in college that her dream was to be a concert pianist. She practiced 4 hours a day. And I thought, okay, you want to be a writer? Are you writing 4 hours a day? You want to be a designer? You want to be a video producer? Are you working at it 4 hours a day? Yep. It wrecked our dating life, needless to say, but she's a brilliant pianist today. Yeah. And so it does take practice. Let me give you some quick suggestions. I got some books here that I love. One of the things I'd encourage people to check out is a book called Daily Rituals. A guy named Mason Curry wrote it a few years ago. And here's what's interesting, Niels. He said that he looked at the top 200 most creative people of the last couple hundred years. Writers, artists, thinkers, truly creative people. And you know what? He looked just at their daily routine. He didn't look at anything else they did, didn't see what they created, just said, let's see what your daily schedule is. And you know what he found out? He found out that the most creative people are slaves to routine. They get up at the same time in the morning. They go to work at the same time. They take a lunch break at the same time. They go to bed at the same time. They focus a certain time of day on their work. And it was inspiring to me to realize that creativity is not about inspiration. It really is about perspiration. It's about putting in the work, showing up, and getting it done. So it's a really insightful book from that perspective. Just give you an idea that if you're waiting for that brilliant moment to happen, it ain't going to come. It ain't going to come. You need to go in and do the work. So here's some quick advice about creativity. And this will help you jumpstart things, I think. Number one, introverts really have a good point. Solitude is the place you start. I love brainstorming. I love being at work with my team. I love being around my friends. But the truth is, unless you can get alone, brainstorming is great for exploring ideas, but eventually I need to leave the group, go into my office, shut the door, and start focusing. Solitude really, really does matter. And there are certain places, I mentioned Daily Rituals, and it's not about inspiration, but there are certain places where ideas seem to come more. The shower. 75% of creative people say they get brilliant ideas in the shower. I think it's physical. That warm water hits you, you relax, you're not worrying about the mortgage, you're not worrying about this, this ugly email you got this afternoon. ideas start hitting you. I'm also the same way with driving. I get great ideas when I'm driving, which I think is a great insight. So, but and something else to think about is what time of day and location are important. You know, we all are victims of circadian rhythm. We have what we call bodily rhythms that we go through about every 90 minutes during the day. Some of us are morning people. Some of us are afternoon people. Some of us are nighttime people. I think the largest group is morning people. Second largest is nighttime. And there's a small sliver of people that really kick in after lunch. But I can get up at 6. I can work from 6 in the morning till noon like a maniac. Afternoon, I'm worthless. I can do phone calls. I can meet. I can travel. But as far as focused creative work, I need to do the morning. So first of all, figure out what time of day you're creative. The second thing is location. My office, you can't see it too well, but there's one window there and it's got giant blinds on it. And I've got some, couple windows over there that are translucent. The light comes in, but you can't see out. I have to have total quiet. A bank vault would probably be my perfect creative location. I saw some research the other day that indicated certain people get inspired during the dull roar of a coffee shop. So when you hear the conversation of a coffee shop, that inspires certain people. So maybe Starbucks is the place for you. For me, it needs to be absolute silence. So whatever it is, figure it out and try to carve your day and form your day around what time of day you're most creative and where you're most creative. And let me tell you something. Build those boundaries. Even if you're a single parent and you've got kids at home and you're working at a home office, build boundaries so you have that creative time. It's incredibly important. The last couple things I'd say real quick is understand that daydreaming is a really positive thing. In fact, there's some neuroscience recently that indicates daydreaming is actually physically good for your brain. So just sitting around, letting ideas percolate, letting them flow around, I think is a brilliant idea. And the last thing I would encourage you to understand is just to understand that most creative ideas are hated before they're loved. You know, people don't like to change. And my book, Jolt, I wrote about just how difficult it is for people to change. And I saw one study that 85% of open heart surgery patients go back to their old lifestyle within 2 years, which means that if the fear of death doesn't make you change, what will? So understand, people don't like to change. So your ideas won't always be loved, but if you persist and stay with it, people will eventually come around. So it's an interesting thing. One other book I just mentioned to you real quick is just a unique book I picked up the other day called Think Like an Artist and Lead a More Creative, Productive Life. It's a terrific little tiny book. You can throw it in a purse or a briefcase and read it. It's just really inspiring. One of the things I've learned, Niels, is that if you're constantly reading about creativity, it just inspires you. I mean, I get excited about it. So that's what really pumps me up and makes me want to go out and create is reading stuff, stay on top of it, talking to people like you. There you go.
I love it. Thinking about the systems involved in creativity and you even saying you scheduling creativity, it's almost to me as if I've perceived a schedule or systems being the anti-creative, that in creativity you need no systems. You need to wake up whenever you feel like it, and then you drink coffee and you do it, it's as if structure hinders creativity. What I'm hearing is quite the opposite. Is in many ways we need to create structure to enable our creativity. I'm curious, Phil, in the midst of, and I think about church communications directors or church creatives, they've got a checklist of, I've got to create this bulletin on Sunday. I've got to create this promo video for this. And then the 2,700 emails that come in every day of requests, and it never ends. And Phil, you're running a business and running multiple things. No doubt your checklist is long. How do you balance the stuff that has to get done and still creating that space for creativity?
That's a great question. And one of my comments about the fact that, be careful of the time of day you're creative and where you're creative. I know people have a normal job. Some people are in a church or a ministry or a business, and they can't always just carve out the mornings or the afternoons or the evenings for their creativity. Yeah. So just do this. Focus as much as you possibly can. And one day you'll be released to do it. I wrote my first 2 books working at a full-time job. In my early 30s, I wrote my first 2 books coming in 2 hours early. I would come in at 6 o'clock, so I'd have 2 uninterrupted hours before the workday started. And I wrote my first 2 books that way. So if you think about it and you really focus and create that routine, I did it every day and I got used to it. It wasn't, a pain after a while. And so that routine is so incredibly important for doing that. Now I'll say this. One other thing to think about is I'm probably like you. I'm an early adopter when it comes to digital stuff.
Yeah.
And so I actually have a folder of productivity apps on my laptop. I mean, I've tried them all. I've tried Wunderlist. I've tried Asana. I've tried Same Day. I've tried Things. I've tried OmniFocus. Just whatever you got, I've tried it. And they're all on my computer. But what I discovered was digital, particularly when it comes to scheduling your day and your to-do list, digital apps are just so easy. I use Things a lot. I use Asana with our team, our creative team, so we can kind of see what we're doing.
Yep.
But for me personally, I use Things. And the problem is Things is so easy.
Yes.
I mean, I can take an email and turn it into a to-do. I can take a portion of a website, turn it into a to-do. I can take a portion of a document or a full document, turn it into a to-do.
Yep.
So I look up and I've got 500 to-dos on my list. And I know you're supposed to prioritize, you're supposed to filter, but the truth is we dump. Creative people dump. We come up with stuff all the time, put it on the list. So I got so frustrated, I started thinking, I started to go back to a print planner. And I know that sounds really, the opposite direction, but I decided there needs to be a space in my digital life where I carve out for analog time, and that's my print planner. Now, I've searched them all. I probably got 30 of them in my office that I'm looking at, and I found two extremes, which are kind of interesting for creative people out there. One is like planners like a moleskin, things that are blank. You can do whatever you want. You can use them as a sketchbook, whatever, just blank pages.
Yep.
A bullet journal is a good example of that, but the problem is you've got to create every template. If you want to do a to-do list, you have to draw it in. If you want to create something else, draw it in. I don't have time for that. I'm a creative person. I'm working. I don't have time to create my to-do list. Then I went to the other extreme and found all these planners that, oh my gosh, they've got so many questions for you to fill out. I mean, they want every day they want you to fill out, what's my magical moment today? What's my daily affirmation? I don't have time for daily affirmations. I got to work, I got a job.
Yeah.
Then when it comes to weekends, I actually found one planner that on the weekends, they want you to reflect and write down what you ate on the weekend. What do you plan to do for rest and relaxation?
Yeah.
Watch a football game. I don't need to write that down on my planner. I'm good. So for creative people, I could never find something that balanced a little bit of, structure with freedom. And so we created one. It's called Unique. It's a planner for creative professionals, the ultimate planner for creative professionals. Got the prototype right here. It's just come in. And I'm really excited about it. It looks like a moleskin, but let me just show you what we did that I think creative people are really, really going to respond to. In the front, it does have some things like yearly goals, major yearly goals, habits to develop. It's got a few pages where you can write that stuff down. It's designed to be a 6-month planner. So over a 6-month period, what are the major goals I want to accomplish? What are the habits I want to develop? And then there's a couple pages for big goals, 6 big goals, and what are the next steps I need to take to make that happen. But beyond that, it is pretty much wide open. And let me tell you what I do every single day.
Yeah.
You could put your own date in there so you can start it whenever you want.
Yep.
Don't waste pages. Then there's 3 priorities. And these are just a lesson in productivity for creative people. I discovered that when I write down 3 priorities for the day, it helps me focus. Mm-hmm. I can look at my to-do list on Things or on Asana, and I see 200 things to do.
Yep.
But at the beginning of the day, I sit down and figure out what are the 3 things I can actually do today and I should do. What are my priorities? And I wrote those 3 things down. So I have a space for that in the planner. Then I put a little space in here for personal stuff. One of the things we creative people forget to do, personal stuff. I got to go get that birthday card for my wife. I've got to run to the grocery store and pick up the drugstore and pick up my prescription. I've got to run that errand for my spouse. So I want to put that in because you need to have a personal life, and we need to be reminded of that. I just couldn't find those in planners. The other thing that's interesting is I put a space for key calendar events. Now, here's the thing. Most creative people are working off a shared calendar. My team uses Google. Laura, my assistant, can see my calendar. My wife, Kathleen, can see it. Dan, our producer, can see it. And I can see theirs. So most of us are working off shared calendars like Google, so we don't need to waste a bunch of pages in a planner with a full-on calendar. But on a day, a specific day, I want a little section where I can put specific key, super important things. My podcast with Nils, for instance, I've got it. I can put that down. Then I'm not going to miss that. That's going to be really important. Then I've got a little space for extra tasks at the bottom. If you do happen to burn through your top 3 priorities, you can list a few extra things. Or these are things that if you're creative, other stuff comes down the pike during the day. You get that client revisions, notes from the from the agency, whatever you need to fix, there's space for that. And then on the other side of the page is nothing but a dot grid, which means you can draw, you can sketch, you can take notes, whatever to your heart's content, because I think we do need space to let our creativity unleash. So that's it. 6 months of that. At the very back, I've got a index, so you can write down the page number if you've got a particular thing. If you had a brilliant insight on page 36. You can write it down in the back and make a note so you can always find it. I just found, Nils, that this is a perfect size. It's the perfect middle ground between having something that will force me to write down my priorities, my key things I need to do today, my personal stuff, and then my notes that I need to make during the day on projects I'm working on. But it's not so much that I spend an hour every day filling out stupid things. I don't need daily affirmation. I don't need my magical moment. I don't need all that stuff. So I think for creative people that really want to really have a little structure to their day, get that routine going that we talked about, and yet be free to really create stuff, I think this is really exciting. So I'm really thrilled, and I appreciate you letting me mention it on the show today, because I just think tools like this, when it comes to creativity, tools like this can really unleash people to do amazing things. And so I made it a size, it's 5.5 by 8.5. You can throw it in your purse. You can throw it in a man bag, whatever it is you carry, or a backpack. And I think it's a great tool.
I can't wait to get one, Phil. I got a question about it. Before I ask that question, where does somebody go to get it? Go to Amazon, or what? Is there a website you
can go to Amazon. It's called Unique, the Ultimate Creative Planner, Unique, the Ultimate Planner for Creative Professionals. We actually have a website called uniquecreativeplanner.com. You ought to write that down, uniquecreativeplanner.com. And if you want to look at details about it, see pictures of it, and the different pages, and learn more about it, you can find that at uniquecreativeplanner.com. And any bookstore can order it.
You know what? And we'll put a link in the show notes at socialmedia.church to that URL. Phil, I was with John Foreman from Switchfoot last week, and he was showing me his voice memos, and he was saying every time, I was asking him his process of writing songs. And he said he just records voice memos all the time. And he says he has so many, he loses them. There's no structure to his creativity. And he says sometimes they'll play voice memo roulette, and they'll just scroll through, and they'll click on something and listen to it. And I love the structure, Phil, you've put to creativity and really creating a process, because what often we can do in the midst of is create chaos, and then our creativity doesn't get maximized.
Well, you know what? I went through a period like John, where I would come home at night and I'd get ready for bed, and I had ideas on the back of matchbooks. I had ideas on the back of napkins, ideas on the a little piece of paper, and I just dump them on my nightstand. And like I say, you will never find me. Here's the thing: you never know where that brilliant insight will hit you. I can give you thousands of stories where, in the most unusual, out of the way, odd place, an idea hit me like a bolt of lightning that was incredibly important for what I was doing at that time. And so you will never find me without my iPhone. I've got 2 or 3 to-do lists on my iPhone. I got note captures. I got audio captures. Then I'm always carrying this around, and I even carry a couple index cards with me. I mean, you just never know where that idea is going to hit, and you should always be able to write it down and give it some kind of organized structure. Otherwise, you'll forget it, and you lose that moment.
Yeah, and I'm a digital guy, but I do always have my Moleskine with me. There's something about writing things down that helps us process, at least some of us. I cannot wait. Go ahead.
Oh, let me tell you. Speaking of that, I don't want to interrupt here, but let me tell you. Let me give you a few quick little stats here.
Yeah.
Journal of Experimental Psychology studied 166 people and found out if their phone goes off in a meeting, their blood pressure spikes. Their heart rate goes up. They start sweating, whether they answer it or not. It goes up.
Interesting.
The Applied Cognitive Psychology, the Journal of Applied Cognitive Psychology, found out that your kids' grades will go up a full level if they don't have their iPhones with them when they're at school. Schools that ban iPhones have a dramatically higher scoring student body than schools that let them come in. So there's the distraction factor is absolutely huge. I mean, there's no question about that. And so I'm not against phones. I mean, they're going to be around all the time. Great, let's have them. However, there's enough data, enough information to say that one study, for instance, indicated that when you do write something down, you remember significantly more and for significantly longer. Yep. So the phones are great, but the idea of physically writing and this is the thing, we're not pharmacists, we're not ditch diggers, we're not doctors, we're creative people. And of all people that need to be writing things down and remembering ideas should be creative people. So I think this is the perfect mix of using to-do lists on your computer or your phone, and yet getting the priorities down and having a place to put your ideas in paper where you'll actually act on it.
I love it. Well, Phil, my last question for you around this is I would love to know your creative process from idea to developing out the bindings of the book. What was your process from idea to now having this book available for people to use?
Well, there's a lot of weeping and gnashing of teeth in there. No, in the case of the unique creative journal, I think that I had been frustrated for a long time, as I mentioned earlier, and so I went and bought a bunch of stuff. That's what I do. I like to go out and experiment and see what's there. Before I write a book, I'm going to go on Amazon to see if that idea has already been done, see what's there, what's out there. I do a lot of Google searches, and I did that in this case. I bought a bunch of planners. I ripped them apart. I pulled them through. I wanted to see if they lay flat, which this one lays flat, which I really wanted. That was important to me. Yeah. Little things like that. And then how much do I have to fill out? How much is it going to help? And I tried them. I would pick one for a month and another one for a month and another one for a month. So I went through a long research process. Then when I started writing down, just jotting down notes of what I liked and what I didn't like, what drove me nuts, I started talking to a couple publishers. And the guys at Broad Street Publishing, they did my wife's recent devotional that she just published about 6 months ago, which is a terrific devotional. And they published it and did a great job. And I thought, okay, maybe they're the guys for this. And so we started talking about it, and they got super excited about it. They wanted it in leather, so it'd be nice. They realized that this is something you're going to carry to a meeting. It needs to look impressive. It needs to look serious and not have, flowers and birds and stuff on it. So we started putting our heads together, and I told them what I wanted. They'd send me back artist renderings, and we finally hit on something we really, really liked, and we made a deal to do it. So it's I think from a process perspective, it may help people who are listening or watching today. Number one is do the research, make sure you know what you're doing and what your goal is and what you're trying to achieve. Right. Number two, start experimenting, try different things, work it, get it out there. I want people to see my early draft. I want to talk to people about it. What do they think? Yep. And then I start collaborating with somebody. In this case, it was a publisher who could actually make it happen for me. And we started working together on it, and we just really hit it off. And so what ended up is something that I think we're going to be really proud of, and I am proud of. And I think it's going to be a real tool to help people.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, Phil, it's been fun to get to know you, and I appreciate how much you've spoken into my life and my creative being, and how you've spoken into so many other creatives. I know that the church will be better, and the church leaders who are listening to this podcast will be better because of this conversation. Phil, how can people connect with you online?
Oh, I'd love for them to. My blog is probably the focal point of everything I do, philcooke.com. I'm Cooke with an E, Philcooke. I write a blog post there 3 or 4 times a week, and usually it's about the stuff we've talked about, the intersection of faith, media, culture. I'm all about creativity, and I'm particularly focused right now on my blog on leading creative teams. I just think that we need to learn more and understand more about how to lead creative teams, and I've done that for so much of my life that I want to share what's happening out there. So leading creative teams, the planner obviously is uniquecreativeplanner.com. Feel free to go there. Our company, Cooke Pictures, Cooke again, cookepictures.com is our production company. So I'd encourage people to go check it out and see what we do. And you can get to me on my blog. You can email me from the blog. So I'd encourage people to do that as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Phil. Thanks for being with us. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of the podcast. For show notes and everything else about the podcast, go to socialmedia.church.